Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webcast. I'm happy you're all here. This is Michael Kennedy. Let's give folks just a couple of minutes to get signed in. You know, the last unexpected, you have to install some app to join the webcast sort of thing. And then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, well, that's probably enough time for folks to get here. Whoever is not here yet, they'll have to funnel in as things get going. So let's just get started with a couple of things. Will this be recorded? Yes, it will be recorded. Will the code be available for download? Yes, I'll show you a link to where you can get it just in a minute. All the code that you see here is going to be available. If you have questions, you can either put them into the Q&A section or just throw them into the group chat. We have everyone muted at the moment just because it will be chaos with everyone talking. So feel free to throw stuff in there, and I hope you're excited to get going. And yeah, looks like everything's good. Recording's good. All right, so let's get going. So the topic that we're going to cover today is a whole bunch of little techniques, 10 in particular. We might touch on some others, but I have 10 especially lined up for you for Python web developers. Now, this is not to say, oh, I should go use Flask, or maybe we're going to introduce Django. These are more things that you probably haven't heard of, or you've heard of, but you haven't really tried in some particular way or other. Okay, so little quick, easy to adopt techniques for the most part. A couple of them are a little bit bigger, but a lot of them, these are like 5 minutes and your web app is better. And a lot of them are also span the different frameworks. The Python world these days, there are so many different web frameworks that it's getting to be a little bit challenging to know which ones are current, which ones you should be working with. Should I be using Molten, or should I using Masonite, or should it be, you know, the standard Django, Flask, Pyramid type of things, right? Luckily, what I'm going to show you for the most part works across all of those different frameworks. Now, quick thing about Wintellect, they're hosting this webcast, so I want to say a few nice things about them. They do consulting, they do in-person instructor-led training. They also have an on-demand training around Wintellect now. They've written a bunch of books, a bunch of smart folks work there, a lot of friends of mine, things like that. So check them out. And if you're interested in these, maybe taking a Microsoft certification course or doing in-person training, reach out to my friend Martha Garin. You can see her email address, mgarin@wintellect.com. At the bottom here, I'll show you again that at the end, and you get some discounts and set up training for your organization. I said you can take the code with you. Yes, you can. Here is the Wintellect webinars GitHub repo, and I'm going to be putting my stuff in there as we go. You won't see this right away. I got to do a PR back to their GitHub repo, and they got to accept it. So if you need the code right away, you want to see it right away, most of it's already there. Actually, replace the first Wintellect in the URL with Mike C. Kennedy, and you'll get the immediate version, but the course, it'll make its way back here eventually. All right, with that said, let's get to the top 10 features and tools to explore that I put together for you. Again, these span most of the frameworks. It's not framework specific for the most part, and they're also really quick to adopt. First one, HTML5 form features. So we're going to write some code over here, as you can imagine. So let's go and open that up here. Close off a few things that I don't need. I'll use PyCharm. You can use whatever you want. There's nothing specific to do with PyCharm here. So here we can see there's a whole bunch of stuff, including some Docker files that it's trying to get some, PyCharm's trying to help me with. And I've tried to group them by each one. You kind of get a little preview of what we're going to cover. The first one is something really quick and easy. So I want to start with something super quick and easy, but also I don't see it used nearly as much as it should be, which kind of blows my mind. So let's go over here and open up this cool little sign in for our new company that we're creating, our new product called FoxRem. So I use this cool like startup generators website that'll just randomly generate startup names for you, and it generated FoxRem. So we're creating some product. It's a SaaS service called FoxRem. Over here, I can put in my name, and maybe I'm going to put, let's put like Michael at talkpython.fm. And for my email, I'll put Michael because I'm not paying attention. I'm not even going to set a password. And then I click this button, and it doesn't really do anything, but I put some JavaScript to show you the kind of stuff that it would be doing, right? Like this is what the server would see if there were a server, right? This is what the form submitted. So my full name is actually my email address. That's kind of wrong. My email is my name. That's also wrong. And these probably, I should probably fill them out. At least the password should be required, right? So a lot of these forms don't take advantage of this, right? And for this, I could put I'm 22, whatever, right? Also not a valid age. So let's go over here really quick. Now, obviously, every one of these should just get a quick required, right?
Hey, Michael,
Like all...
can you wait one
Yes,
second? I don't know if anybody can see your screen.
perfect. That's what you're supposed to see. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So here we have my beautiful Fox rem, which you all didn't see. Looks like that the GoToWebinar was frozen up. I had to force quit it in order to even get it to let me out. So we've got this form, and obviously when I click it, like I said, but you guys could not see, it's submitting this data back to a theoretical server, right? But it's not adding what is required. It's not enforcing that things are required. Like I was able to submit the password without a password. The years I could write like 2 instead of the number 2, things like this. So let's go and change that. So what I can do is I can go down here and I can say all these are required, right? And that's obviously better. So if I come down here and I try this again, well, after refreshing it, of course, like so, I can come down here and it'll say automatically these are required and it has a nice little feedback. So of course, that's good. But what I had done is I'd flip my email and my password. So what you can actually do in modern HTML is add all sorts of amazing types up here. And I could say that this is an email. And I also had that problem with the numbers. I can say that this is a number. So let's go and try that again. So now if I try to put my name here and try to submit it, first let's get rid of this one. Now you can see over here, it's going to say the problem is this is not an email address, right? Beautiful, huh? And the password obviously is required. So do michael@talkpython.fm and it's all happy. Want something for this. Must be at least 6 characters. Currently have 3, 4, 5, 6. That's pretty awesome because I already have a min length required here. And then this one, notice has a little spinner, but it starts at 1, 2. Maybe I only want to accept adults. So I could come down here and say minimum is 18 and do this again. Now if I hit the little up arrow, it automatically starts at 18. It won't go below that. And down here I can select something. So looks like we're pretty close. Probably don't need to register that inside of 1Password. But now you saw that there was not even a JavaScript pop-up until actually I had it all filled out. Why more sites don't use this, given that it's like seriously ridiculously easy? They have all sorts of postback and whatnot. I don't know, but you should definitely use these features and look into them. Like I said, there are a ton of just types, and then for the types, you have values like minimum and minimum length and so on. So tip number 1 will be to make use of that. So quick and easy one, assuming that you don't have frozen up presentation software, but the concept is quick and easy. Let's get to another one that is also super easy, but incredibly powerful, ngrok. I don't know if you all have heard of ngrok before, but ngrok is interesting and it solves this problem. Suppose I need to somehow share or expose my web app on my development machine while I'm working on it, right? Maybe this could be something as simple as like a quick get together meeting where it's just like a presentation of what we're working on. And I haven't pushed it to production. I would like to just let people who are, say, remote log into my machine, right? One option is to set up little test servers in your house and open up firewalls or in your office and all sorts of crazy stuff. That's possible, but it's entirely unnecessary, as you'll see. One of the places this really becomes a huge benefit is anytime you have webhooks. Like imagine I'm working with like an online store, they're selling stuff for me, but I need, like say, to create an account on my site. When somebody buys something there, I can set up a webhook coming back to my production server. That's fine, but if I have to debug that, how do you debug what they're sending to your production server? It's super, super hard. But now with this thing called ngrok, which is free, it has a paid version, but you can also use the free version. So we go over here, and I'll bring this over. So in order to run it, let's go to something we want to share. Let's suppose that this site right here. This is a Flask site that I've created, and it's on port 5000. Okay, so C5000 there. That apparently is not the one I want to run. Let's run a different one. I have a whole bunch of these. I thought I just tested it, but apparently not. Let's go and run this one. Here. There, that's better. So let's suppose I want to run this. Now this is from a class that I created where we model PyPI, the package service for Python. But this is, like you can see, this is running on localhost, right? It's got like little login and register bits. I can come down here and it's got all this stuff. Suppose I want to like let somebody look at this, or I want to hook an API endpoint up so external systems can call into it. And I could set a breakpoint in PyCharm and step through external systems calling this. So all I got to do is say, all right, port is 5001. So I'll go over here and I'll say in Grok, once you install it, I'd like to open up HTTP over to 5001. And what it does is it goes and uses my free plan, as you can see up here, to expose this local host at this URL. And I'm going to throw this into the chat. There you go. Get in there, people. I'm going to go throw this into chat, and y'all can go crazy on it. Here, see all those requests coming in? And I can go over here and I can show you my site. And I say, you know what? Find, install, publish. Find, install. Let's go ahead and just change something real quick about this. Find, install, wonderful. Find and install wonderful Python packages. Now, if you come over here and you hit that URL, as I am up here at the top, find and install wonderful packages. Isn't that cool? And notice it's not just external, it's over SSL, and it's a backwards SSH tunnel over to here, right? So it's totally secure. I haven't opened up any ports in my firewall. Firewall's super closed. So I could take a URL like this, because it's encrypted, put it into somewhere like, say, Gumroad, into their API, their webhooks, and I can come over here if I had an API thing, right? I could come down here to one of these views and set like a breakpoint right here and say, okay, go ahead and call it. Go make that thing happen on the system. It's going to call back, and I can just start stepping through that external system trying to submit data to my website. So I think this is super cool. It lets you both share your data, as many of you are still probably clicking away. Oh, somebody broke it. I don't know what you did, but you did some bad stuff to it. But that's okay. So you can see things working good. A bunch of people are trying to register and doing various stuff. Well, I'm going to shut that down, and it's gone. Sorry, I know that was fun, but isn't that cool? And to do that, you just need, you just need, get a browser up in Grok. Go over here, install the free version, and you're off to the races. Super, super cool use case. So there's another example of what we can do. I'll stop all these for now and go back to my, whatever my next one is. So no need to go set up your servers, make your house or your office look like this. You can just, expose your little test version directly for interacting with external systems, external APIs, or you're just in some meeting and you say, hey, you want to see what I wrote? Here, click on it, see what you think. So in Grok, great. The next one is async and await. So this one's a little more involved, but not that much. So I feel like people really underestimate the value of having async or IO-driven asynchronous programming, especially on the web. So let me talk about that really quick, and then I'll talk about actually the specific web use case. So then we'll go back and look at two examples. So the first one is just using async and await. If you're calling external APIs or something like that, this alone could be super helpful. So imagine I have just one thread. That's typically how Python works. It's got one thread. It's not super easy to make multi-threading really powerful in Python. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but computationally, a lot of times it's the single thread is kind of what you got to work with. But if we have multiple tasks indicated by color here, and we break them into small little slices where in between the slice we're waiting. So let's imagine this green bit is I want to go to the database and issue a query, and then I want to get a result back from that. And then I want to traverse an ORM relationship, which is then going to do a second query and pull back more results, right? But Those three little short bits are these green things here, and the stuff in between it that can be happening in between it is while I'm waiting on the database to get back to me. So what we can do in that manner is we can break our tasks up into little tiny bits and get more done while we're doing this, okay? So async IO and async and await in Python are super easy to do this, and it doesn't even have to do with the web. Maybe I'm talking to the file system, or I'm talking to a database or whatever, right? Lots of scenarios, async and await makes sense. Now on the web though, this makes even more sense because normally you would have sort of single threaded behavior in a lot of the web world in Python web servers. But if we break this up in using async and await, and while we're processing a request, like say request one, we're probably mostly waiting on a database or an external API. So we can actually go and process request two and request three, and we can get much better response time. So let's go look at two examples, one like a generic concept of async and await, and then this one using this framework called Quart. Quart is basically Flask, but async, okay? So let's put this away and come over here. So for the async foundational stuff, let's just look real quickly in an example, and then we'll see it show up in the web. In order to take some function that is interacting with something that is IO driven, like for example, this, let's get into this get HTML or up to it. Here it is. So get HTML, what this is gonna do is it's gonna go to my podcast and it's going to download the HTML of it and then do screen scraping on it to tell you what the title is. Obviously, I could go to the RSS feed and just do this, but it's more of a concept than it is a practical thing to get the titles from my podcast. So all we got to do in order to leverage async is instead of using something like requests, which does not have async capabilities, is use something that does like AIO HTTP. So we create a client session, and the syntax is kind of crazy. You can have these context managers with async. So asynchronously create the session, asynchronously do a get to the URL, and then we get a response back from the server, but we haven't yet streamed potentially the data back. So we're going to then perform that here. All right. Now, that's not too hard to write. And over here, we just say this is an async method. And then down here at the very bottom, we can go and just say, I want to go kick off a bunch of these get HTML tasks and then wait for them to all finish and go. So if I run this in serial, the ping time, well, let's figure out what the ping time is. The ping time is 88, 89, 88. You know, I'm going all the way across the US. I'm on the West Coast. This is in Virginia or something like that. It's definitely on, actually, I think it's in New York. Anyway, it's all the way across the US. So the ping time is that. So if I'm going to download 10 things, I'm already at almost a second, right? I'm at like 900 or 0.9 seconds just in latency to go get 10 things. But if I can do them all at once, send them all to the server, and then get them back as they finish, then I don't care. So I can basically do 1 or 100 at the same speed, assuming the server can take it. And for the most part, it can. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go and crank through 10 of these real quick. So let's run that. Make sure I run the correct one. So you can see, let me run it again a little higher. It goes and kicks all those off, and then bam, they're all done. And it probably is a little hard with the screen sharing to see how quick that is, but that's like definitely under a second to do all those things. It's really, really nice. So we can use this in general, but it's especially important in the web because most of the time what web apps do is they wait. They wait on the database. They wait on calling APIs like Stripe or Bodo or whatever they're doing. They're mostly just waiting. So the big part for this one is we can go and use this framework called Quart. Quart is like Flask. They're all containers. They all serve. They all pour. And the API is meant to be exactly the same as Flask, okay? So if you have a Flask app, you can make it asynchronous by basically replacing the word Flask with Quart. Now, of course, you have to install Quart for this to happen, right? You got to pip install it. But we replace, normally you say Flask.capital Flask name to get an app. Here you just say Quart. And down here, you can do all sorts of stuff with, say, your views. Let's go over here. You can have non-asynchronous standard functions. Or you can have, like here's an API we're creating, then has async functions that then await. And the important thing here is this is calling external APIs, right? Somewhere else, some other weather service is going to go get the weather, and it's just waiting for that service to come back to you. So we can handle thousands of requests to this with almost no effort or load on our server, because what we're just doing is passing that load through, holding onto the socket, and waiting for a response here. Super, super cool. So let's go ahead and try to run this and see how that goes. So if we go run this, comes over, it says, oh, you have to go to some URL that's actually part of the API. So we can go API, weather, zip code, US, and boom, look at that. Comes back with this JSON document here with what the weather is. What is the weather right now? Looks like we have broken clouds, and it is 204 degrees. Woo, it is hot in Portland. You guys didn't know that, did you? It's a Kelvin or something weird like that, but that's the answer we got, right? And we can handle way, way more of it because we're not entirely blocking up our server while we're waiting on that external service. And what we have to do here is incredibly simple, right? Very, very little to actually make this happen. Let me scroll through and see if there's any questions. Oh, can you have the GitHub share on, yes. Can you have the GitHub share on chat? Yes, you can. There you go. Let's see, I'll look through a few more questions. Toby says that's super cool, awesome, glad you like it. Are there recommended server-side validation separating some client-side validation? Yes, and actually we're getting to something that I have as a pattern to talk about that. It looks like, okay, all the stuff is about screens afterwards, cool. All right, so keep putting your questions out there if you have more. Now, this is all well and good. Definitely recommend checking out the async stuff if you're using one of the more modern frameworks, not Flask, Django, Pyramid, Bottle, etc., but Molten, Sanic, API Star, Starlet, all of these things, Responder, all of those have that built in, right? But if many people have Flask frameworks or Flask apps up and running, so if you can just do a find and replace on Quart, that's a pretty slick way to get there. All right, next one is database migrations. So I would certainly recommend that most of the time you talk to databases, you use some kind of ORM. You don't have to, but your life will be easier, your interaction with the database more structured if you use something like SQL Alchemy or Django ORM or something like that, right? So let's go look at one of those down here. Clean up a little. So they're great, right? So if I come down here, I have this app, and let's look at this. It's Flask. Okay, run it like this. It's up and running. Does it work? Yes, it works. Let's clean this up as well. So again, this is this fake PyPI thing. You can click around. You can see some stuff. Here's some details about a project. This one's a little more farther down the path than the one that I shared over ngrok earlier. So this is super cool, and it works doing, like if you look at the database queries, it's incredible. So let's go over here to the views, like say the package view. Now, all the stuff should not, your direct database queries should not be in your views, right? No. They should be like in some other isolated layer, data access layer, which is here. But here's how we go and get a package. And this is probably like the most complex query we write. We go here and say, I'd like to go to the query, to the database, do a query based on the package. And I would like to do a I guess we're doing a join. You do a subload or a join to also include the releases related to this package. So I don't have to go back and do a second interaction with the database. And the query I want is where the ID equals the passed in package ID. And then I want just either the first one, or if they've asked for something that doesn't exist, I want to get none back. Yeah, super, super nice. And if you look over here, you can see all the stuff is defined. An ID, create a date, types, all that. Notice I'm using type annotations here. This is super important in SQL Alchemy because the editor looks at this and says, oh, you have a field called homepage. And what is it? It's a column. And what does columns do? Columns has all sorts of junk about append a foreign key. Should I be able to append a foreign key to a string? No. But if you tell it explicitly it's a string while you're working with it, it'll act string-like in the editor, not column-like. So anyway, that's what the types are here about. So it's really nice to work with these, usually, except for what if I have other help URL here? How well is that going to work? So you got to edit the right files. So what happens if you make a change to your schema? Ideally, you want the classes to just be the source of truth that defines what is happening over in the database. And SQL Alchemy, if you define one of these classes, you create one of these, it'll create a table called languages with these 3 columns. That's cool. However, if you make a change like we just did right there, we add something that's not in the database, or we take something out of the database that used to be here, it freaks out, right? It just doesn't at all like it. It completely crashes and says, oh no, this thing doesn't exist. So then what do? Well, what we can do is we can use, for SQL Alchemy, we can use Alembic, and for Django, we can use Django migrations for the Django ORM. And down here, we got to get into a different spot. I think 5, yeah. So down here, where at the top of our project, what we can do is we can run this thing called Alembic. So the way you get started is say Alembic, init Alembic, hit enter. That'll create this INI file, a folder that has some settings. It'll tell you, go edit these 2 files or these 2 locations to set like the connection string. Once you've done that, you can say Alembic current, ask what is the current version. And what you get back is an answer of what version of the various migrations that you happen to have up here applied, right? You'll have a bunch of those, various changes your database has gone through and what version it's at. What we need to do is create another one to add other 2, okay, to add this other column. If we look at our database by making a little more room than we got here, we open that one up and we go look in it. We look at packages. You can see it as other, but not this second other. I guess I was playing with it earlier. So what we need is somehow to get that over here. Do you do it by hand? Do you do it manually? No, that's bad. What you'll do is you'll say Alembic, and then you can say create a revision, auto-generate it. And I guess paste had a new line in it, so it just ran, which is fine. So what it does, it creates just something called adds. It has the comment name in there. And that has done nothing to our database. Our database still doesn't have that, but it's created this file, which now is going to go and add the column if we were to run it. So then we have to say Alembic upgrade to head, whatever that just latest. And if we go over here, what do we get? Now we have an other 2. It's gone and made that change for us. We go back to our app. Guess what? Is it going to work? Of course it's going to work. It's now resynced. Whatever was taken from the database would have been put back or whatever. It basically puts it in sync with the changes that we made over here. If we add an index, it'll put the index, all those kinds of things. All right, let me have a quick look on questions here. What ORM do you use with something like Quart? That is a good question that doesn't have a super answer. So there are a couple of options. SQL Alchemy, async. I think there's this extension you can get to add on something. This adds async IO support for SQL Alchemy. It's not built in. There's also py ORM. And py ORM itself doesn't actually support async, I believe. It didn't a while ago, but there's something called async py ORM, right? Which is this extension for it as well. So there's a couple you have these extensions for. I wish they did a better job of supporting it. The folks who create it a lot of times say, oh, it's not worth it. It's massively worth it. Like, maybe it's not worth it for certain small things, but if you're trying to scale to thousands of users on your website and you're running thousands of blocked threads because, well, they're just waiting on the database, it seems like it's pretty worth it to me. So anyway, something like that, I guess. All right, what is next? This one. So it's pretty easy to set up Alembic, assuming that you edit the right files. This is the problem of having like 10 copies of the same web app. I was editing the wrong one. Apologize about that. So definitely check that out. The next one is, most of the time you don't actually have to write that much JavaScript to make really interesting and interactive web pages. You saw we had a form that had good validation just using HTML5. The web app that you saw before had no JavaScript. I know some people are very big fans of having all front end everything and just having services. And that's one viewpoint, but I actually think server-side frameworks are really powerful and important. And you should only have to add on a little bit of interactivity, maybe for like a dashboard page or something like that. So Vue.js is one of these frameworks that's really, really nice. And it actually is my favorite because it's clean and it doesn't require that it takes over your whole site and is the whole, becomes your front end. It lets you just plug it in here and there. So let's go look real quick at some fun AngularJS stuff. Put this away. Sorry, not Angular, Vue.js. So if we go over here, we have our view. So I have this app that I've created. Now let's just go look and see it in action. The idea is, it's like a movie search app. This is from one of our courses that we've created, and it's like one of the demo apps and apps that people build there. So what it does is it goes and it talks to movie service.talkpython.fm, which you can go play with if you like over here, and it has all these endpoints for like searching for movies. And so it just talks to that through Vue.js. And what it can do is you can say, I'm over here looking for stuff that's fun, and it'll go and pull that up, really nice. But also if I click on crime, it'll show me all the categories in crime, clear that out, and select the dropdown for the genre. If I go over to animation and then click family, you can see family's now selected, and it lets you just cruise around, super nice. And you can see how incredibly fast this is as I'm just clicking on it. Really, really nice. Get just the top 10, clears that out. So this kind of app is incredibly easy to write with Vue.js. So let's just look at a real quick flyover of that. So over here, what we do is we say we have an app, and it's just this little section of this one div on that page. Everything else is, unaffected or uncontrolled by Vue.js. We come down here and say, I want to go and have a search input box, and I want that to have two-way binding to search text. Notice that search text is purple, and vModel doesn't have an error. It's because I have the Vue.js plugin for PyCharm. If I click on this, it'll actually take me to the code definition of that. It knows that that's a Vue.js binding and where it comes from, which is pretty awesome. Here's a function that gets called when you hit enter. Here is where we generate that select, and if you click on one, when it's changed, the selection, it calls load genre with that, right, which repopulates it. And then we just loop around the movies, and for each little badge we put down there, if you click on it, it calls load genre. Like this is 50, I don't know, let's look at just the div part. 40 lines of HTML, and if you go over here to the JavaScript, we're at 65. 40 lines of HTML, 65 lines of JavaScript, and you get a super cool, really fast interactive web app like that. That's pretty awesome. So if we just look over here, we have, this is the data that we're binding to. We have the search text, and we have the movies that are actually in the list. This is all the genres that could be selected. This is the one that is selected, and this is what you reset it to if you unset it. And then if you click on, let's say, the button that has a little badge, right? It goes over to that service. It loads up the movies from there, which is just super little bit. It sets the movies to the response from the server. That triggers the binding to regenerate all of this right here. So if I click on this, like it just automatically, if I pick the right one, automatically regenerates that part right there. Super cool. So if you got to do something interactive like this, you can just drop a little Vue.js in on part of your app, and boom, it's really nice and interactive. Let's see. Yep. Okay. Just a final question, comment on the database stuff is, yeah, because without async, database support would be blocking. Yes, it would. And it's a key reason to have async. So, all right. Anyway, Vue.js, here's an example. It's really quite easy. Like a lot of these front end frameworks, it takes a little bit of tweaking to get things kind of wired together right. But here's a nice example you can take and just run with. This is just the client side front end bits. The server side is obviously just out on that service I showed you. All right, the next one I want to talk about here, going to go a little quick because we're getting low on time, is server-side validation. We saw the cool at the beginning, the opening, the HTML5 validation. You can put required and minimum and min length and things like that. It's super cool. But what about the server? The HTML stuff, you have to basically assume that that's not working, that's being bypassed on the server. Okay. Anybody could open up some kind of thing like Postman and just start hammering on your server. They could use requests, they could use whatever. They don't have to go through a browser that's respecting your HTML5 validation. So you have to revalidate things again on the server. And sometimes you have to do more validation, right? Like you want to check this user that they're trying to register as, does it exist in the database? You probably don't do that with HTML5. Maybe you do with JavaScript, but it's really not necessary. Just do it on the server. So the way it normally works, the way a lot of people write web apps is they say, okay, well, this method that's being called when I post to register is super complicated because it has all this validation, all this data exchange, all the scenarios, and it's just ugly. It's hard to maintain, and most of it's like validation and data exchange. And then there's like a little tiny bit where what it's supposed to do actually happens somewhere, okay? But what we can do is we can use this view model pattern. And the idea is we're going to create a class whose job is to do the data exchange. It knows what the form has, what it's supposed to post, how it's supposed to convert, like say from an integer, a string to an integer in the form field, things like that. It'll actually do all the validation and then just give that data to this view method, which can then say create account or no, sorry, that account already exists. All right, so let's go look at that real quick. Over here, I have a nice example for that. And I've got to reset this as a source root for this to run. So over here, this one, we have this app. Let's go and run it. Good. This one is going to also be a copy of this PyPI thing. And over in login here, it'll let me do things like maybe put in my name. Actually, I'm going to log in just my email address, like this one. And if I enter, it says the user cannot be found, or maybe it should say password is required or something like this, right? We could easily add some required fields here and make that happen. But I'm having this happen on the server for this example, okay? So how does this look? Let's go look at that real quick. So what we have is we have this view, and this would be the account view, and there's a bunch of stuff happening, like I can get my details about my account, I can register, I have a register get, register post, I can log in, and so on. But if you look at this, look how incredibly simple this is, even though it may have tons of validation. We create this view model thing I talked about. We ask it to validate. If there's an error, we say send the data back to the user. If there's no error, we have to do this kind of funky response so that we can set a cookie using this decorator that we got going on here. And then we just give it back. All right, so incredibly simple. Right, was this thing able to validate them? It got the user, so we're going to set the cookie to that user they got. Really, really nice. And over here, we have a folder called view models, also broken out by the view. So we have an account, and we have all the stuff that happens over here. So then we have this function, or this class, login view model, and when we create it, it will go through and it'll get the email, it'll get the password, initialize the user to nothing, and then just store the data, right? Normalize the email to be lowercase without spaces. Like, how often do you hate websites that go, your email is invalid because there's like a space or something in there? It's ridiculous. And then it actually will get the user and whatnot. So we could do things like all sorts of validation we want down here. For example, maybe we want to say if not self.email, we could say self.error equals your email is required. Now, of course, that would probably be better served as an HTML5 validation sort of thing, but you get the idea, right? So I come over here and say if not self.password, the error is your password is empty. Something like that, right? But then if we actually go get the user, didn't work, okay? So let's go make sure that's running again. Now, if I try again, this error should be a little richer. It says your password is empty. Let me take that out. Your email is required. If I put an email, hey, I guess I actually got my password correct. Okay, so it does all that validation, and we can add, what's beautiful about this is we can add ridiculous amounts of like cases and checking and normalization. And this method here, this is where the action actually is happening. it doesn't get any more complicated, right? It's create the thing, validate it, check the error. Really, really nice pattern. Now that's not some library that you can just plug in, but it's pretty nice, pretty easy to work with. You usually have like a certain set of data you're exchanging with the template, the form, and this model usually is like closely tied to that. All right. Feel free to throw out questions if you have them. But otherwise, I'll just keep going because we're getting low on time. All right, so that was number 7, view models. The next one up is Docker, okay? And I won't show you the slides for that, or just show you Docker. So containers are really nice ways to package up our code and just make the environment we want it to run in exactly reproducible. Then we can ship this off to servers, we can ship it off to Kubernetes clusters and make it run, all that kind of stuff, right? So it turns out setting up a Docker server is pretty easy. So for example, remember that movie Exploder app? That's the little Vue.js thing you just saw? Well, here it is, and let's put this into a Docker container. So we come over here, and this is literally all we have to do to set up a server to make it run. So we have to install Nginx, which is the web server. We have to delete the default website and then copy our server configuration right there over to sites enabled. And we have to copy our source code over to run Nginx. That's it. The base server sets up like some Python things, and it's just Ubuntu and stuff like that, okay? So this is it. And if we want to go run this, this is great. So we come over here. I don't want to actually run Docker. PyCharm has built-in Docker support, but I just want to do the terminal thing. Which one I want? Oh, wait. Okay, so we come over here, and let's go into this front-end thing. Now, we can just go over here and say Docker. We could say Docker build dot, and it will build. Actually, you go like this. It goes and builds this randomly named thing. You want to run it, you want to tie it together with other stuff, well, good luck, because that name changes every single time. So we can do a little bit better. We go Docker build, and we can give it a tag, front end latest, and we build that. Then it gives us a name that we can consistently refer to, which is cool. We got the same number because nothing changed. And then I can say Docker run port 80, mapping port 80 to 80, front end latest. And if that runs, we can go over here and just check it out. That's super cool, right? So we have top 10. That looks, I don't know, maybe it's not so super cool. What is wrong with this? Well, what's wrong with this is over here, we also have the web service. I showed you a movie service. It's over here as either a Flask or a Responder API, something like that. Didn't really matter. It also needs to be running. So it would be nice if we could run these as a group. Of course we can. But first, let me come over here and do a Docker PS, Docker kill that off. Okay. All right, so that's done. That was fun. But if we go up here, we can actually open up this thing, this YAML file from Docker Compose, which allows us to build multi-container apps. All we got to do, excuse me, all we got to do is say there's a base server and its tag is this. There's a front-end server. Its tag is whatever it was. I guess it doesn't have to have a tag because we don't refer to it. Here's how we run it. It depends on services and base. And over here, we have our services as well. And it's going to map port 7007. In order to run this is beautiful. All we got to do is come over here, make sure you're in the folder that has Docker Compose, and say Docker Compose up. It goes and builds them, make sure that they're all up to date, and then it launches them. And if I go back here now, I've got this other one running. Look at that, it's working, just like before. Isn't that cool? And moreover, look at the bottom. You can see the request coming in over localhost to our services container from our front-end container. That's fun and fast. There we go. Cool, huh? This Docker Compose stuff is maybe similar to Kubernetes as well. You shut it back down. Oh, got to go to the right place. It has to see that Docker Compose file to know what to shut down when you say Docker down. So let's turn it back off, and pretty soon everything is going to be gone. All right, so let's look at two more, and then I'll give you a chance for questions. I want to make sure we stay up on time. So Docker Compose, very nice. The next one's Let's Encrypt. So if you have a website, you should have SSL, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because if you care at all about Google rankings, your site is going to be ranked higher and the user experience will be better if it has SSL. And I mean, user experience is better that Chrome, for example, doesn't say this page is not secure. You should really be suspicious of it. So let's go and do that. And it turns out that it costs no money these days to do it because you have Let's Encrypt, which is a free SSL service. And it's incredibly easy. Like I knew about Let's Encrypt for a long time, but until I actually saw it in action and tried it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is easy. Why did I not do that before? Let's see it in action. So if I go over here, actually, I had it open, I closed it earlier. I have up on DigitalOcean, I have a server which is running over at that IP address, okay? Now at this IP address, we have a site which has a very fancy name, testssl at talkpython.fm. I just reused the domain so I didn't have to register something new. If you pull it up, surprise, look familiar, right? So there's the site that we've been playing with, and it's running over here on this server that I set up. It's a Flask version of this site. But if you go click on this, site is not secure, right? And if I go and I use HTTP, which is a super cool little library, it gives me this back. But if I try to ask for the SSL version, there's no SSL version, right? And the reason is in my Nginx configuration, I'm listening on port 80. I have no SSL certificate. I am listening to this right here, which won't probably exist after this webcast. I'll probably take it back down. But anyway, it's here now and it's listening. How do I add SSL to this? Well, check this out. We got a few steps. I threw them in here because I just don't want to remember them. The steps come from DigitalOcean. They have a really nice example. So what I need to do is add a repository for certbot. So let's do that. So we've gone and gotten it. That's cool. And then I need to install certbot. It's going to do that. It's got to take it just a moment. And while it's thinking, all we have to do is say, I would like to use Nginx, and actually this is the one I want to run. I want to use Nginx. There's also an example to recreate this site from an open source project that you can get from me. So that's what this part's about. But this is what my domain says right now, okay? So we come over here and I can just run this, and it says, I need to know, this could be Michael at talkpython.fm. I agree, definitely agree. No, I'm getting a new certificate. It's talking to it, it's waiting for verification. It's making sure that this domain actually exists. The reason I have this weird domain is it has to actually be looked up. And it says, if somebody hits the non-SSL version, what do I want it to do? I want it to redirect automatically without complaining to the SSL version. Cool. Now if I go and look at this, you can see there's more stuff over here. Where are we listening? Somewhere. Yeah, so here's where the listen is. So we're listening on port 443 now and port 80. So let's just go back here and hit this again. It automatically redirects over there to my SSL version. Connection is secure. It is secured by Let's Encrypt. If we view more information, what do we know about it? I don't know, probably not much. Probably has my email in it or something like that, right? Cool, huh? So that's literally all it takes to have SSL. Like we're done. We don't have to do anything else. We do need to, every 3 months, run certbot renew on some kind of schedule. So if we do it like this, it'll say we're trying to do a renew. We'll just make sure that's going to work. And it'll say, actually, you don't need to run this. That's what it's going to say. All right, but this certificate's only good for 3 months. So you need to rerun this renew or run it with this renew option every so often. All right, so that's it. You should have SSL on your sites because look at that. And then let's see, we have one more thing, right? The last one is this thing called secure.py. Regardless of what Python web framework you're using secure.py is probably a good idea. Maybe you're familiar with OWASP, an open source web consortium that's about web security. They have all these recommendations, like you should not let iframes be embedded on your site if they're from other domains and weird stuff like that, right? How do you make that happen? How do you make sure your site is doing that correctly? So secure.py automatically plugs into your web framework and adds the necessary headers to make sure that security works well, and also has secure cookies. And it works for all sorts of stuff. AIO, HTTP, Flask, Hug, Masonite, Pyramid, Django, Starlet, right? It doesn't really hardly matter. So let's go over here and look at that super quick. So last one is I want to run this thing down here. Okay, so let's go and not look at this in a browser, but somewhere where we get a little more visibility. Let's look at this in Postman, which is a REST testing exploration app. All right, so let's go down here and let's do a GET request to that. And if you look at the response headers, you can see it has like the standard ones, the server is this, content length is that, and so on. But it doesn't have the security recommended headers. How do we enable it? Let's check this out. Super easy. So we go over here to our app.py, which is here, and we pip install secure, which is a pretty awesome package name, and you just add this decorator. After a request, I want you to go and set the Flask response headers. It automatically integrates for every request through Flask. Nothing else to do there. Now, if I go back to here and I duplicate this tab, and I hit it again, now I have 12 headers, and look at this. Strict transport security, iframe options are same origin, refer policy is such and such, no sniff, et cetera, et cetera. Isn't that cool? And all I had to do is like literally put those 4 lines into my file. I guess I put one line into a requirements.txt, but basically you put that in there and you forget about it, and it just takes care of handling all of this stuff. So secure.py, it's so easy to use. I don't really know why you wouldn't. So it's pretty awesome. All right, and that's the top 10. Thank you so much. I'm going to open up to questions here in just a second. Before I do, a lot of these examples came from my 100 Days of Web in Python course over at talkpython.fm/100web. Check that out if you want to see that one course online. If you want to have training from Wintellect, in-person training, that sort of thing, talk to Martha over at mgaron@wintellect.com. And with that said, see if there's any other questions here. It looks like there are some. Okay. Yeah, Jason, you're welcome. I've got both sides taken care of. Have I heard of schools? Have you heard of tools like JSON schema or Cerberus for complicated models? Yes, Cerberus is pretty cool. I pull that up real quick, say something or other. So this comes with, if you type enough, I believe this comes with the Eve framework. And this is, let me just double check. Yeah, that comes with the Eve framework from a friend of mine, Nicola, actually. And the idea is you can set up basically a validation for JSON and stuff like that. So it's super nice for doing things like this. Let's see, like here's a non-trivial example and so on. So if you're doing, I guess, API validation, this certainly could be good. If you know that it's only going to be like structured like this, you could hit it first with this, and that's not bad at all. Yeah. Let's see, next question. How does Docker support in PyCharm work? That's a good question. So I can come over here, and where's my Docker? If I click Docker run, what happens here? You can see it has, it finds my various things that are running down here. These are the ones that I've these are my definitions, and down here somewhere are like this one right here is the one that I created. And I can go to this one and I can say create a container based on this, yeah. And I create an image, let's say Docker image services, and it goes and give it a second, I think it's running. Deploy log, yeah. And let's just go see if I can think this one runs on 7007. Oh, you know what? With this one, there's no port bindings, but you can say I want to go from 7007 to 127.0.0.1 to that port, and then stop and run it again. Where did it go? And maybe need to do up here. I don't do this very often, so you can probably remember that. Yeah, so I want to bind the port 700. It opens up this little dialog, which, where is that going? There it is. So I want to go from 7007 to 7007, like so. And now if I say run it, actually just run it like this. So you can see it's running there. Something's not quite working right with it, but it's okay. So the idea is you can go and like start your servers and configure their properties and run multiple ones and do builds and whatnot, right? So it just gives you a little way to kind of control it. But you know, it's helpful, but there's a lot of things you're like, wait, I'm not really sure how this is working or how that happens. So I don't use it that much. Often you want something like Docker Compose anyway, but it is pretty nice. Like if you look at here, you can see it has like autocomplete for the various options and things you can do for building Docker files and so on. Okay, next one. What terminal am I running? Oh, my favorite terminal. Oh my ZSH. So I just install oh my ZSH into macOS by running this right here. And yeah, it's super cool. It has like really nice memory of all the stuff you did, and when you're in folders that have Git repos, it has a lot of support there. A lot of cool things it does. Really, really like it. Yep. Why no Safari in my app bar? I don't like Safari. That's why. I'm a big fan of Firefox. I actually have the other two browsers right here, not because I also like them, but because I want to be able to go to certain sites logged in as a different user. So for example, if I visit like, I don't know, let's just take something simple like Twitter here, this will be like my personal account. But if I visit Twitter with this one, it will be like the TalkPython account. I know there's apps for that, but there's just sometimes I just want to be logged in as different stuff. So I have like, this is like the TalkPython browser, I guess. All the accounts are logged in there as that and so on. I actually have the Safari one for something like that as well, but I don't use it very often. All right, I see some more questions. Let's see, what do we got here? Yeah, thanks. Glad you enjoyed it, and greetings out in BC. That's a great place. Sorry about the hang up at the beginning and my SQL Alchemy bug thing there, but happy y'all could come. Thanks. Will you be able to revisit this webinar later? Yes, it's recorded, and you'll be able to visit it on YouTube for Wintellect, either on their Wintellect YouTube channel or Wintellect Now. Maybe one of the Wintellect folks can throw a message into chat where it's going to go. But you should be getting an email from them with a follow-up when the recording's available, and it's also on YouTube. You're welcome, Eric. Thanks for coming. There are a few tools I would like to remember. Yeah, for sure. There's some definitely good stuff here. Feel free to ask more questions if you have them on that. You're welcome, Charles. Oh, while we're sitting here, let me go ahead and then I can wrap things up. But let's go ahead and push all these changes back over. But leaving the slides there and that one. There you go. Here, I'll push this stuff to my Mike C. Kennedy repo for now, and that way you all have it right away, and then it'll also show up on the Wintellect one I showed you the link to real shortly. All right, folks, let's call it a wrap. Thank you for coming, and hopefully you found something interesting here. See you all later.